The nickname did not stick, but if Ohio State running backs are the Cadillac position of college football, they had to spend all spring trying to find two high-performance machines to replace the ones that left. Welcome to The Beat. That is Berm. I am Austin. It's Tabs, if you're nasty. The Austin and Berm Show is back, and we're doing a little spring position review, and we're starting in the backfield. And it's when you lose Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, Berm, that's a pretty big deal.
Yes, it is a very big deal. And we should note, we would start with quarterback, but we did talk for about 40 minutes about quarterbacks on Thursday, on Three Things Thursday. So I think we've dissected that position enough. We know that's a two-man race. We think that this running back position could be a two-man tandem, but we'll see if that works out that way or not. Obviously, losing Travion and Quinshon, you lose two top 40 NFL draft picks. You lose two guys that have a ton of experience, 6,000 plus total yards of college football productivity. And you bring back, as you can see on the screen, not a whole lot as far as returning productivity for Ohio State. The CJ Donaldson does have, I think, just about 2,000 yards rushing in his career at West Virginia, but it's CJ Donaldson and then four guys that Ohio State really hasn't had to count on. James Peoples played some minutes last year for Ohio State, not a lot, but he did turn heads when he was in there. Certainly to the point where the expectations were pretty high for him heading into the spring. But beyond that, boy, it is funny to go from a room that had the most returning production with just two guys to a room with potentially five or six players that you look at and you're like, well, nobody's got production. So it's definitely different.
Well, I mean, even going into last season, you had the body of work for Travion and Quinshon. It was like, these are the two of the most veteran backs, two of the most productive backs in all of college football. One had done it in the SEC. One had been doing it for Ohio State for 3 years. And it's like, you can't ask for much more. Now, there's still plenty of potential on this Ohio State roster, but I think that's the single biggest factor. And maybe this is a position where we talk about all the time. You don't necessarily have to be a third-year guy. You don't have to be a senior. You don't have to have had 600 carries in your career to go out there and make an impact. We've certainly seen that at Ohio State. We've seen that across the country. So, having that potential is what you'd rather have. If you can combine it with the veteran experience, that's even better. But as you mentioned, you look at this group, James Peoples is trying to, catch up. He got a taste of experience a year ago. CJ Donaldson was not necessarily the full-time back at West Virginia, but he's got a great body of work. And then you're immediately skipping ahead to Sam Williams-Dixon, who was in the portal during the playoff run, although he was still practicing and still with Ohio State. Didn't seem like his heart was really in leaving Ohio State. We can get to that later on. And then you're like, well, Bo Jackson looks ready to go. Maybe they just have the next true freshman. But you're not in a situation where at Ohio State right now you get to have all the best of both worlds, which is what Quinshon and Travion provided them a year ago. So this is, for year two, a pretty fascinating test for Carlos Locklyn as he's rebuilding this group on the fly.
Yeah, and I think in some ways it's one of those things that's probably a lot of fun for Carlos Locklyn because he gets an opportunity to build his own room essentially from scratch, which to be able to do that 1 year into your time at a program like Ohio State is pretty unusual because generally speaking, the cupboard's so full of people behind you that you have a couple years of trying to figure that out.
They only have one people.
One peoples and five other persons to deal with. I think the one thing that we've said before in other iterations, in other conversations is that, and it's not a knock, but running back is the easiest position to transition into if you're a football player going from one level to the next, because while there's nuance, sure, the pass blocking, that sort of stuff that you have to become really good at if you want to be an NFL player. At this level, the real difference is the guys chasing you just are faster than the guys that used to fit. So if you're fast enough, you can still play the position and still make an impact as a freshman, which is why we saw Bo Jackson especially really step up for Ohio State heading into the spring. A player that had a lot of upside coming out of high school, out of Villa Angelo St. Joseph in Cleveland. A guy that Ohio State really thought physically had all the tools, but we weren't sure how that translates. And then you see Bo Jackson playing this spring for Ohio State, and he was dynamic. Every time we got a chance to watch the running game, it was hard not to be impressed by Bo Jackson. It's hard not to have your eyes go, oh, that looks like it's how it's supposed to look. He's the biggest guy out there, maybe even next to CJ Donaldson. Now that Donaldson's lost the 20 plus pounds that he's shedded since he got into town from West Virginia. So I think, it's natural for us to talk about James Peoples as the returning guy. It's natural to talk about CJ Donaldson as the brought in guy. And last year, Ohio State only needed 2 running backs because they got, let's call it what it is, I think probably lucky to get through a 16-game season with only having to use 2 running backs. So that may not be the case this year. So you really need to be able to turn to someone else. And Bo Jackson being there early has put himself in that conversation. Unfortunately, Isaiah West, who got there early, is still on the shelf a little bit, probably won't be ready full-time, full go until the end of the summer. So it is an opportunity for Bo Jackson and Sam Williams-Dixon, who you brought up, so we can dive into that. Sam's situation is, I think, an unfortunate reality of the new era of college football, which I always lament. But, it's a kid who got some really bad advice from people in December saying, hey, you should enter the portal. You're not going to play. He did not have a relationship with Carlos Locklyn when Carlos Locklyn got to Ohio State from Oregon last March. And so it put Sam Williams-Dixon very much behind the 8 ball, knowing full well that when Carlos Locklyn got to campus, he wasn't going to be able to spend time with the new guys. Like he had to get to know Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson and get those guys to buy into his vision for things. And it's clear they did. But I think through year 1 for Sam Williams-Dixon, it seemed pretty clear that he felt on the outside looking in when it came to the running back room. And, that's where Tony Johnson, Larry Johnson's son, who's the assistant running back coach for Ohio State, he spent most of his time with Sam Williams-Dixon. And so you had the big 3 with Quinshon, Travion, and James with Coach Locklyn, and then there's Sam Williams-Dixon. So you can understand his feeling like, hey, maybe I don't have a spot. But now if you look at the depth in the roster and the availability of other guys, you've got to be pretty happy he stuck around.
Yeah, and I thought you could see even just 5 open practices. I'll keep reiterating that we didn't see all 15, but I think if you looked from the start of March through the spring game, there was clear sign of progress and growth for Sam Williams-Dixon. That's natural. You're heading into the second year on campus. You've got the full weight room, full winter workouts behind you. I think he maximized that. Now, it wasn't probably the smoothest process when you go into the portal and then you're having to make other decisions and you come back, but he didn't like I said, I didn't seem to me like he jumped in with both feet. When you and I were talking in December, you're like, well, this is probably going to happen with Sam Williams-Dixon, and he's not going to stick around through the winter practices, the playoff practices. He's going to move on. And then I was out there the next day for one of the open workouts, and it's like, he's still here. Like it didn't seem like he wanted to leave, but as you said, he was trying to figure out what the next step was going to be, what the right step was going to be. If he was, I want to phrase this the right way, like valued enough by Ohio State. And I'm not talking financially necessarily, what that would look like at other schools, what the opportunity would be. And maybe that's a better way to look at it. He's trying to figure out, what could the carries be? What could the workload look like into year 2 or year 3 as Carlos Locklyn is evaluating that whole group? We talk about this with other positions. It applies at running back as well, especially when only one of them is generally on the field and touching the football at a time. Who does he want carrying that load? What does he view for James Peoples, CJ Donaldson? Bo Jackson is now a factor into that conversation. So you want to get some of that feedback as well. And as you mentioned, like that just maybe hadn't quite happened in December between the head position coach, the head of the unit with Carlos Locklyn and Sam Williams-Dixon. And then they've had a chance since then. And it looks like it's being pretty productive since.
Yeah. And to be clear, going back to those December conversations, that was because that's what Sam Williams-Dixon had said. He said, I'm not going to stick around. I am going to, and again, you think back to the year he had to have from the minute that Carlos Locklyn took over at Ohio State it comes December. He has had no relationship. Sam Williams-Dixon has had no real relationship with Carlos Locklyn at that point. And then you look up on signing day and Ohio State is bringing in Bo Jackson, and they're bringing in Isaiah West, and they're bringing in Anthony Turbo Rogers from Alabama. And then 2 weeks later, they bring in a transfer in CJ Donaldson. And you're like, okay, so now I waited all this year to get to this moment where it's just me and James Peoples going head to head because Travion and Quinshon are gone. And now there's 5 other guys. And so then it's like, oh, this changed things considerably. But it is a reminder and a example for kids who are out there listening to this. If you're a high school athlete and you watch our show and you listen to me talk about Ohio State football, like that's life. I mean, that's what it is at Ohio State. There's always going to be great players coming in after you. There's always going to be great players before you. And so Sam Williams-Dixon from the start, even back in his recruitment, had a tendency to listen to bad advice from people. And he got more bad advice in December, and he admitted it, which is the nice thing. I mean, if we go back to the opportunity we had to speak with him and the running backs in March, he fully went on record and said, hey, I was listening to some people who had their best interest in mind, not mine. And now he can be a productive part of this offense and this running back room. Does that mean it's going to be an opportunity for him to win a lot of reps this year? I don't know. Maybe not. But either way, you're going to get a much better accounting of where you actually stand heading into this year than you did a year ago. So if he ends up moving on a year from now, then at least he'll have had a real chance to see where he stacks up at Ohio State. And then the value for other schools is, I think, much higher if you put in a couple years into the Ohio State program as opposed to 6 months.
Yeah, no question about that. So you say you're not sure, and we can't be. We don't have a crystal ball about what the role for Sam Williams-Dixon will look like. I don't like to do this. You know this about true freshmen. I have a hard time imagining Bo Jackson not playing immediately. This is way out over my normal skis when it comes to someone who's been on campus for 4 months and a week, 4 months and 2 weeks, whatever it's been. You touched on seeing him make some plays in spring and just the physicality that he runs with. There would be a number of opportunities when we saw Ohio State going team period, full contact, quarterbacks are live, everything's live. Bo Jackson is just finishing off goal line rushes and scoring touchdowns. And then the next drive, he's bouncing something outside in the red zone and gaining 20 yards, running away from tacklers and defenders. Like, he seems to have everything that you could possibly want. And I didn't even know how much we were going to see from him in March and April coming off of the injury a year ago. So all of this came as a pleasant surprise for me, not just that he was out there, but that he was like, in my mind, I was legitimately putting him in there in a 3-man, not just a 2-man rotation at running back.
Yeah, I'm generally speaking somebody who is quite bullish on Ohio State freshmen because I have the ability to watch them and get to know them as they're coming in. And I'll admit that, like, I had a touch of skepticism about Bo Jackson and his ability to get to Ohio State and make an impact because throughout his high school career, he dealt with injuries and it seemed like it stopped him from being as fully productive as he could be at that level. And so when he gets to Ohio State and you start to see not just him looking physically ready, which he certainly looks that way, but then when he gets out there, as you said, he's running people over, he's bouncing off people, he's running around people, he's running away from people. And you know, that is all it takes at running back. So can you do that consistently? And it's not a situation where you have Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, so you feel pigeonholed into saying we have to give these two guys the ball. Like, this is a situation for Carlos Locklyn where he's going to give the ball to the guy who's the best player. And I think for Bo, one of the things that's always a concern for young guys is ball control and how well are you protecting the football. Ball security is certainly something that any young guy has to deal with. And then he has to work on the physical side of things, as we talked about with Travion before, like the pass protection and that sort of stuff. But in this offense, it seems to me that where last year it was a conscious effort, like to give Quinshon and Travion opportunities. I think this year, and it's obviously too early to make an entirely bold prediction about it, but I think this type of year where someone comes out of the gate swinging and they're on fire early and they're running the ball hard and they're seeing the holes well, that maybe that's just the guy you stick with because I don't know that you're going to see as much of a commitment from Ohio State to say, well, we have to give both of these guys the ball all the time like they did a year ago. So I think it actually sets up for a really interesting fall camp for Carlos Locklyn, because we always talk about the first spring and can you get over the mountain in the February workouts, and then you get to spring ball and then you can exhale a little bit. But now you have 3 months on your own where we see who really takes it seriously, which of the early enrollees are able to maintain that momentum that they had in January, February, March, and how many of those guys can actually do that in June and July. And so we'll see if Bo Jackson has that capability. But what we saw, there's no no way, no reason to expect that he's not a regular contributor at running back for Ohio State after the spring.
Well, I think that's what got my antenna up about Bo Jackson was going into camp. They had in late February that day of availability with all of the assistant coaches. Don't always get that, but it was a welcome opportunity here. And when Carlos Locklyn was speaking, there was some conversation about what he liked about CJ Donaldson, why he pursued him, what year 2 was going to be like for James Peoples, what he did well in year 1 as they were working together. But then there was almost like this over the top appreciation for what Bo Jackson had done in winter workouts and mat drills. And I was like, okay, that's usually you have the de-recruitment process, right, Berm? Like Mickey Marotti's going to make it almost impossible on you, and you're going to get coached at a level that's like beating out the reputation, whether you were a 4 or 5 star high school superstar, whatever. Like you're now at Ohio State, and you're going to this is going to be that hill that you're talking about getting over in spring camp. And like Carlos Locklyn, I think, came away very impressed with what Bo Jackson was doing then. And I didn't, again, 5 out of 15. I didn't see anything that was telling me that he was hitting a wall or going to be unable to deal with that moving forward. Now, training camp and that grind and the length of a season, that's all different. So, he looks like he can withstand all of that physical punishment and, the demands of playing the position. But it's every other day for 4 weeks in spring practice. So that is the part where now I got to talk myself back, remind myself of why I don't go out too far on a limb with true freshmen, because what he has to do in August and what happens when you play Texas and what happens when you get into a Big Ten schedule is going to be very different. He just looks like he's responded to the workouts and the challenge thus far, and that has me anticipating some pretty good things for him. And I already talked about that, like with CJ Donaldson's role and the way he's transformed his body. He's done that long enough for a Power 4 program that it's, in some ways, you look at that, it's the same way as Will Howard's. Like, all right, the body of work is there, the resume is there. That he understands what it's going to take to get through a season. And is why I've sort of come to this point where I don't know if you agree with me or not. Is like I may have been underestimating CJ Donaldson, and I feel like he's gonna be. If we're doing bold predictions, I feel like he's going to wind up with more carries than anybody else on this roster.
I can see it happening. I don't think we should at this point ever underestimate or undervalue what it means to have a guy that's played college football somewhere else. I mean, especially at a place, and this is not a knock on West Virginia or Kansas State where Will Howard came from, but when you come from a second tier program, and those are good schools, like those are programs that 98% of the kids around the country would die to have an offer from. But when you are at that level, at a place like Kansas State or West Virginia, and then you get to Ohio State and you see exactly why Ohio State is where it is, I think it motivates those kids in a way that maybe true incoming freshmen at Ohio State may not have an appreciation for. I think that they see like, hey, this is actually different. This is championship level, and we can be there. And I don't have to bring everyone else along, which I think is the what you saw out of Will Howard. His opportunity to come in and just be like, hey, everyone here already thinks like me. Everyone here has the same mindset that I do and the same goals. And that's not always the case at Kansas State or West Virginia. And again, those are really good programs. But, I go back to that de-recruitment comment you made about Bo Jackson. I think it's interesting for Carlos Locklyn, who came into Ohio State. Bo Jackson was a player he had been recruiting pretty aggressively to Oregon. Ohio State decided to not go after Marquise Davis, the running back from Cleveland Heights, who ended up going to Missouri and was Mr. Football in the state of Ohio. Like Marquise is a really great player. And I think that it's a moment for Carlos Locklyn to put his stamp on saying, hey, I know what I'm looking for. I know what guys I need in my room. And so if Carlos Locklyn, who is faster than pretty much any coach on the staff to tell you to stop gassing guys up if you are, I think the fact that he was actually out there pumping up Bo Jackson the way he has been is very interesting. I think you actually see that a little bit when he talks about Turbo Rogers, and when he talks about what he thinks Isaiah West is going to be. Similar to Brian Hartline, maybe not quite in the same manner, but like Carlos Locklyn's guys, like these are Carlos Locklyn's guys. He is going to defend to the end. And so I think the Lock boys. No soft batch cookies. That's what we know. I think he wants to prove that the guys he recruits are not soft batch cookies. And so I think he's going to love them up a little bit more than the average coach does, because he's done a great job at insulating and getting guys to buy into his power of the unit faster than most coaches have, in my opinion.
When I was talking about CJ Donaldson on the Stock Watch last Wednesday on the beat, you mentioned sort of a reversal where we weren't supposed to forget about CJ Donaldson going into camp, and then at the end it was like, hey, stop ignoring James Peoples. He's doing really good things. What did you find most impressive about his freshman year? What is it that you think he needs to do if he wants to be the guy to prove my bold prediction wrong? What's the next step for him?
I think the weird thing is that we all have these memories of J.K. Dobbins, and then you see James, and they're so similar. The personality is the same, size is the same, running style is the same. We saw James a couple times out there last year, and every game early in the season when he was out there, you'd be like, "Oh, wow, that looked right. That's something to build on." And I think he almost got a little bit of the response that J.K. Dobbins got with 1/8 of the productivity, which I think is probably an indictment on the way the media talks about football, the way that fans' expectations are about football. And so he came into this spring, I think James did, with this idea that I'm next up. And so he needed a little bit of some reins put on him and an opportunity for Carlos Locklyn to say, hey, you haven't earned anything yet. And then you see how he responds to it. So I think we saw James Peoples respond to it really well. Ryan Day was talking about James Peoples at the end of camp as someone that really had emerged. And he's special. He's like a special running back. And Ohio State felt that a year ago. And that's why they entered last year thinking they were going to need 3 running backs. And they were very, very comfortable having him be the third guy with Travion and Quinshon. But since they stayed healthy and the offense went the way it did toward the end of the year with the passing attack, getting back to normal Ryan Day standards, then you didn't see the need for James Peoples. But what he's going to have to do is just be willing to put on that face that Travion Henderson put on last year, which is like, this isn't fun for me anymore. I'm out here to hurt people. I'm out here to run through people. I'm out here to run over people. Travion, I thought it was really interesting to see the switch up in his life. Like, he went from being early in his career kind of a different, more free and loose guy on the field and more goofy off of it. And then as he got more serious off the field, he got way more serious on it as well. And then you saw him be, a player that NFL scouts are saying is the best blocking running back they've ever seen and all that sort of stuff. So how much of that does James Peoples want? You have 2 years left at Ohio State to make yourself into a legend. Like, can you do it? I think he's going to have every opportunity. I still believe he'll lead the team in rushing. Whether that's most attempts, I think that's something we can parse through or not. I think he will have more yards than anyone else. But it's really all about how serious do you want to be? How bad do you want it? And when you see Bo Jackson and Isaiah West and Turbo Rogers and CJ Donaldson coming for your job, your job in your mind, even though it wasn't handed to you by Carlos Locklyn, like, how do you combat it? And if the spring is in any indicator of that for him, like, I think it's off to a really good start for his career.
I think we should sprinkle in bold predictions with all these spring position reviews and rewinds. I think that'll be fun. We should continue to do that. And here's what we'll do. So we're not going to have a spring position review on Tuesday. We're going to have something else that's going to be new moving forward. We'll be back to do one on Wednesday. That'll be the plan. You tell us. Let us know in the comments. Let us know on social media. Let us know anywhere that you've been consuming the beat with Austin and Berm. What position do you want us to do on Wednesday next? We'll leave it up to you.
If you're keeping tabs.
Yeah. If tabs. No. I've gone too far. I can't let that happen. But it was great to break down the running backs, thinking back to what happened in March and April, doing that in May. I think it's a fine time to do that, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well as we break down Ohio State's running backs, the Cadillac position of college football. Thanks for joining us with a little tabs, the beat with Berm and Austin. We'll see you later.